Good evening. It's Monday, September 7th, another day of blistering heat, wildfires, and possible power outages. California, the current poster child for the worst effects of the climate crisis. The Creek Fire continues its rampage in the Sierra National Forest and may be responsible for knocking KFCF off the air. Hot, dry winds are on the way tonight with warnings of extreme fire danger in the North and East Bay Hills and the Santa Cruz Mountains. President Trump calls Joe Biden stupid and hints a COVID-19 vaccine could be available before Election Day.
If we get the vaccine early, that's a great thing, whether it's politics or not. Now, do benefits inure if you're able to get something years ahead of schedule? I guess maybe they do. But the most important thing to me is saving lives.
Biden says Trump's mismanagement of the COVID crisis has caused unnecessary death and suffering.
The sad thing is, it didn't have to be this bad. It's not this bad in other countries. More than 6 million COVID cases in the United States. Almost 200,000 deaths projected to go much higher. And nearly 30 million on unemployment.
Democratic vice presidential nominee Kamala Harris meets with the family of Jacob Blake, shot 7 times in the back by a police officer. And a British judge rejects a request by lawyers for WikiLeaks founder Julian Assange to delay his extradition hearing until next year. From KPFA Berkeley and KPFK Los Angeles, this is the Pacifica Evening News. I'm Eileen Alfandary. Evacuation orders were expanded today to more mountain communities as a huge wildfire churned through California's Sierra National Forest, the Creek Fire. Firefighters working in steep terrain through the night saved the tiny town of Shaver Lake from flames that roared down hillsides toward a marina. To the north, about 30 houses were destroyed in the remote hamlet of Big Creek. Sheriff's deputies went door to door to make sure residents were complying with orders to leave. The Creek Fire has charred more than 114 square miles after breaking out Friday. On Saturday, rescuers in military helicopters airlifted 207 people to safety after flames trapped them in a wooded camping area near Mammoth Pool Reservoir northeast of Fresno. Some suffered burns. Because of the extreme condition, the Forest Service has closed all of the national forests in central and southern California. Vic Bedoyan reports from Fresno.
Almost overnight, the Creek Fire became one of the fastest-growing wildfires in the state. Extreme heat, dry vegetation, and steep terrain joined to make a blast furnace of flames racing up the San Joaquin River Canyon northeast of Fresno. It has already burned almost 80,000 acres and is 0% contained as of this time. The mountain resort towns of Shaver Lake, Huntington Lake, and Big Creek are threatened. Almost 1,000 firefighting personnel are on site trying to save people and structures in the fire's path. The towns of North Fork and Auberry, including the surrounding rural population, have also been evacuated because of the immediate threat to life. The residential community of Meadow Lakes, where KFCF Radio's transmitter is located, is also under mandatory evacuation. State Highway 168, the main road into the region, is closed, as are many local roads. The only evacuation routes left available to mountain residents are a handful of dirt roads, according to the Fresno County Sheriff. Evacuation centers have been set up for Fresno County at Clovis North High School and at the Oakhurst Community Center in Madera County. Animal shelters are also available in both counties. Although hikers in the High Sierra are not currently threatened by the fire, the sheriff is encouraging backpackers on the John Muir and Pacific Coast trails to get to one of 3 mountain locations so first responders can account for everyone. The Forest Service reports that the fire burnt actively on both sides of the San Joaquin River overnight. Conditions created by the fire and the wind have formed a gigantic mushroom cloud of smoke. The ignition of timber stands is generating massive walls of fire. Fire crews are being challenged to create containment lines in very steep territory with heavy fuel loading and the searing heat that is expected to continue. Sierra National Forest was at the epicenter of 6 years of drought and bark beetle infestation. The resulting fuel load of standing dead trees and dry understory presents a volatile and hazardous situation for firefighters. Additional resources are being ordered, and it's expected that the Creek Fire will be elevated to a Type 1 incident with a new management team and more firefighting resources coming in. Vic Bedoyan reporting for the KPFA News and KFCF in Fresno.
KFCF manager Rich Withers reported this afternoon the station had gone off the air because PG&E power was lost at the transmitter site at Meadows Lake. The cause of the outage was unknown. PG&E estimated power could be restored late tonight. California baked through another day of triple-digit temperatures. While relief from the heat is on the way, fire danger will increase several notches this evening. The National Weather Service says hot, dry winds will begin to blow, creating conditions for even a small fire to explode into a major blaze. The Weather Service issued a red flag fire warning beginning 10 p.m. for the North and East Bay Hills and tomorrow morning at 10 for the Santa Cruz Mountains. All three regions were the site of devastating fires that began last month. While they're largely contained, all are still burning. Wildfires have burned more than 2 million acres in California so far this year, amounting to more than 3,100 square miles. It's a new record, but consistent with predictions of what Californians can expect due to the climate crisis. Officials say the most striking thing about the record is how early it was set, with the most dangerous part of the fire year ahead. Daytime temperatures in fire zones neared or exceeded triple digits. Yesterday, downtown Los Angeles reached 111 degrees, a record-shattering high of 121 degrees in the nearby Woodland Hills neighborhood of the San Fernando Valley. Downtown San Francisco set a record for yesterday with a high of 100 degrees. California's electricity manager, the independent system operator, is asking residents to conserve electricity during the final peak hours of this evening until 10 p.m. so it doesn't have to order rolling blackouts. Residents are asked not to run heavy appliances and to set the thermostat to 78 degrees. Cal ISO averted rolling blackouts yesterday on what it called the most difficult day so far of the year. Meantime, PG&E warned customers it might cut power starting tonight or early tomorrow morning because of the increased fire danger with the coming winds. Some of the state's largest and deadliest fires in recent years have been sparked by downed power lines and other utility equipment. Bay Area counties that may be affected by the PG&E outages are Sonoma, Napa, and Lake. Also, Butte, Shasta, Tehama, Plumas, Yuba, Sierra, Placer, Humboldt, Kern, El Dorado, Calaveras, Amador, and Tuolumne counties. The Bay Area Air Quality Management District extended its Spare the Air alert for wildfire smoke and ozone, otherwise known as smog, through Wednesday. This will mark a record 23 consecutive days for the alert. Air quality officials said light winds combined with very hot inland temperatures and vehicle exhaust were expected to cause smog accumulation in the Bay Area tomorrow. Smoke from the Woodward fire in Marin County and the August complex in Mendocino might produce isolated areas of unhealthy air quality in the North Bay, San Francisco portions of the East Bay, and potentially Vallejo through Wednesday, according to air quality managers. The 2020 presidential campaign entered its final phase today, with President Trump taking pot shots at Joe Biden at the White House. He called his Democratic rival stupid. Trump said people recognize him as the most honest person ever to hold the presidency. He hit back at Democratic vice presidential nominee Kamala Harris, who said this weekend she wouldn't take a coronavirus vaccine solely on Trump's say-so. At the same time, Trump hinted a vaccine would be ready before Election Day.
So we're going to have a vaccine very soon, maybe even before a very special date. You know what date I'm talking about. But let me just tell you, wait. And what they're doing, because they think it is going fast, and if you talk to a lot of your sources, if you have sources, if you talk to your sources in the FDA, you'll see it's going very, very well. The numbers are looking unbelievably strong, unbelievably good. So now they're saying, wow, Trump's pulled this off. Okay, let's disparage the vaccine. That's so bad for this country. That's so bad for the world.
Democratic rival Joe Biden spoke in Pennsylvania at a virtual event with AFL-CIO head Richard Trumka. He said Trump's mismanagement of the COVID-19 pandemic had led to more than 6 million cases and nearly 200,000 deaths, with many more to come. Biden then pivoted to Trump's comments first reported in the Atlantic magazine that service members who were captured or killed are suckers and losers.
When it comes to veterans, he's downright un-American. I've never said that about a president ever, ever, ever. But calling those who have served, risked their lives, even gave their lives to our nation, losers and suckers. These are heroes. I'll tell you something. My beau wasn't a loser or a sucker. Won the Bronze Star, Conspicuous Service Medal, and other awards. He didn't serve with losers and suckers. He served with heroes.
Exactly.
He served with American patriots.
Biden's son, Beau, volunteered to go to Iraq with the National Guard while serving as Attorney General of Delaware. He died of cancer in 2015. Vice presidential nominee Kamala Harris met with the family of Jacob Blake, shot 7 times in the back by Kenosha, Wisconsin police last month. Harris gathered with Blake's father, 2 sisters, and members of his legal team at the airport in Milwaukee, while Blake's mother and attorney Ben Crump joined by phone. Blake himself joined the conversation by phone from his hospital bed. Harris told him she was proud of him for how he was working through his pain. Jacob Blake spoke publicly from his hospital bed for the first time since he was shot in the back. The Blake family attorney, Ben Crump, posted the video to Twitter.
I just want to say, man, to all the young cats out there and even the older ones, older than me, it's a lot more life to live out here, man. Your life, and not only just your life, your legs, something that you need to move around and move forward in life, can be taken from you like this, man. And I promise you, the type of that you will go through, staples, I got staples in my back, staples in my damn stomach. You do not want to have to deal with this, man. 24 hours, every 24 hours, it's pain, it's nothing but pain. It hurts to breathe, it hurts to sleep, it hurts to move from side to side, it hurts to eat. Please, I'm telling you, change your lives out there. We can stick together, make some money, make everything easier for our people out here, man, because there's so much time that has been wasted.
This weekend marked 100 days and nights of Black Lives Matter protests in Portland, Oregon. They began after the police killing of George Floyd on May 25th. Despite an uptick in police violence and right-wing militia groups confronting protesters in Portland, the demonstrators are determined to continue. KPFA's Corinne Smith attended a solidarity-building event in Portland this weekend.
Give me a B. B, we got your B, we got your B. Give me an L.
At Lentz Park in southeast Portland on Saturday afternoon, several hundred people showed up for a community gathering with speeches, songs, inspiration, and sharing resources.
What's that spell?
It's one of more than a dozen events across the city this weekend to mark 100 consecutive days and nights of protests for Black Lives Matter. Regina Rage is an organizer and the MC of the day's program.
And this right here, this is an anti-racist act of resistance. By being here today, you are saying that you are anti-racist.
Araya is with PDX Black Youth Movement, which was formed in the aftermath of the police killing of George Floyd and has led many of the Portland marches.
It's coming out of a place of exhaustion. We're tired. We're honestly tired. We've been fighting our whole lives, and we have to continue to fight by telling you guys our stories. And it's hurting us, you know? It's hurting us, and we just constantly have to relive it every single day.
She asked the crowd to take a look at her attire. She's just come from basketball practice, wearing shorts and sandals, and her hair pulled back. She's not just an angry Black woman, she says. She's also a high school student and an athlete.
Black women have always been taught that we have to fight hard, so hard. We have to put in those countless hours we have to practice harder than the white girl. We have to work so much harder. And why is that? It's because America has normalized it. We've normalized little black girls being in these streets fighting for their lives. But we haven't normalized black girls being doctors, black girls being principals, black girls being teachers. And why is that?
Black women, and especially protecting black trans women, was a major topic of discussion at the rally. Protesters say their demands haven't changed throughout the 100 days. They want to end anti-black racism and police brutality and to defund police budgets to reinvest in community services. What's changed is the increased use of force by police against protesters. Jedi is an artist and organizer with Black Lives Matter. He was one of many protesters arrested by federal agents last month.
July 28th, I went out to protest. Within an hour, I got tackled, arrested, brutalized. They cut my finger open. Asked them, why are they arresting me? They would not answer. Why? Why are you arresting me? Just full ignore. I'm sitting in the back of the car, and I can feel the back of my shirt getting wet from blood. And I'm like, can y'all look at this, please? Just fully ignore me.
He said he was detained for about 2 hours, interrogated, and photographed. Finally, they let him go, but he was given no documentation or court date. He said it was only later, speaking with a legal support team, he realized he was kidnapped.
She helped me realize, wow, like you were actually kidnapped. And I say that to say that is an important piece of this revolution. That's what we're dealing with right now. If the government can just roll through the streets, snatch people up, and hold them hostage for however long, that is a very scary problem to be dealing with.
The next day, he quit his job at T-Mobile to join the protest full-time. On Friday night, Oregon state troopers returned to the front lines of the Portland demonstrations and, along with police, arrested 27 protesters, according to the Oregonian. A viral photo from that night shows a woman beaten by police and blood dripping down her face as she's carried away by officers in riot gear. The Trump administration has deputized the state troopers as federal agents, which means protesters could now face federal charges. The protesters charge that law enforcement has reacted disproportionately, giving a pass to right-wing militia while cracking down harshly against Black Lives Matter demonstrators. Again, here's Jedi.
I mean, cops and Klan go hand in hand. You're going to protect people who you feel an affinity to. And it's really crazy how blatant it is, how much they protect fascism. Yet the state and the government and the establishment doesn't really take any steps to correct that or protect us.
Towards late afternoon in Lentz Park, a car caravan goes by with dozens of decorated cars, flags, and signs pronouncing Black Lives Matter. The demonstrations in Portland are not just nightly clashes with police. They're also a wide variety of actions like mutual aid, direct donations, art and music, care collectives, book clubs, and political education organizations. And with so much at stake, protesters are determined to continue. In Portland, I'm Corinne Smith.
Protesters demonstrated outside Rochester, New York police headquarters naked except for spit hoods in a protest of the asphyxiation death of Daniel Prude in police custody. Photos and video showed roughly half a dozen demonstrators naked or in minimal clothing, some with Black Lives Matter written on their backs, sitting silently with their hands behind them on a rain-slicked street outside the city's public safety building. Prude died in March after his brother called for help because he was having a mental health crisis. Police found Prude running naked through the street, put a hood over his head to stop him from spitting, then held him down for about 2 minutes until he stopped breathing. 7 police officers were suspended last week. State Attorney General Letitia James said Saturday she would form a grand jury and conduct an exhaustive investigation into Prude's death. The mayor and police chief have faced calls for their resignations over delays in releasing details of the death. Nightly demonstrations continued yesterday when police said more than 1,000 protesters marched to the public safety building. Previous night's protests intensified into clashes between police. Local media said there were no such confrontations last night when community elders served as a buffer between protesters and the officers. The mayor of Rochester, Lovely Warren, gave a nod to the peaceful protests.
Their message that we must do better and that we have to address how we police our city has been heard. These calls are not new, and the chief and I have worked diligently to do the necessary work. It is my solemn duty as the mayor of the city to honor Mr. Prude, to not let his death be in vain, and to do everything possible to transform how we police our city to truly protect and serve our residents.
President Trump mentioned Rochester in a morning tweet about cities he said all had bad nights and were, quote, weakly run by radical left Democratic governors and mayors. Protests around the Bay Area on Labor Day. A Black Lives Matter and labor protest march was planned across the Golden Gate Bridge, but blocked by the California Highway Patrol. Some protesters jumped onto the bridge anyway. A San Francisco march and car caravan by San Francisco labor unions was to last until 6:45 this evening and to target Marriott St. Regis Hotel, Lyft corporate headquarters, and San Francisco Giants Oracle Park. The East Bay Democratic Socialists of America were to hold a car caravan and human billboard to rally support for Proposition 15 on the November ballot. It would close a commercial tax loophole that has resulted over the decades in large commercial property owners paying a smaller share of property taxes, while individual homeowners and smaller businesses bear a higher burden. A British judge has rejected a request by lawyers for WikiLeaks founder Julian Assange to delay his extradition hearing until next year, to give his lawyers more time to respond to U.S. allegations that he conspired with hackers to obtain classified information. The move came as Assange appeared in a London court. He's fighting federal prosecutors' attempts to send him to the U.S. to stand trial on spying charges. Outside the courthouse, Assange's father said British authorities are hampering his son's ability to defend himself as they do the bidding of the U.S.
6 months since he's seen his lawyers, so that the insistence, the malice that constantly falls like a Niagara upon Julian is just appalling and indicates to us that the administration of justice here is enfeebled. The attitude of the United States to the United Kingdom is just do as you're told. That's it. Do as you're told.
The U.S. has indicted Assange on 18 espionage and computer misuse charges over WikiLeaks' publication of secret U.S. military documents and video, some of which showed apparent U.S. war crimes. The charges carry a maximum sentence of 175 years in prison. Assange's lawyers say the prosecution is a politically motivated abuse of power that puts all journalists at risk. Human rights and press freedom advocates denounced the British government's decision today to deny them online access to the trial. The German hospital treating Russian opposition leader Alexei Navalny says he has been taken out of an induced coma and is responsive. German experts say Navalny, who fell ill last month on a domestic flight in Russia, was poisoned with a substance belonging to the Soviet-era nerve agent Novichok. The Berlin hospital where he's being treated said Navalny's condition has further improved, allowing doctors to end the medically induced coma and gradually ease him off a ventilator. It noted he was responding to speech, but said long-term consequences of the serious poisoning can still not be ruled out. The German government last week demanded that Russia investigate the case. Hong Kong police say they arrested nearly 300 people at protests yesterday against the government decision to postpone legislative elections. The elections were to have taken place on Sunday, but Chief Executive Carrie Lam on July 31st postponed them for a year. Lam blamed the coronavirus pandemic. But critics said her government was worried the opposition would gain seats if voting went ahead on schedule. Anti-government protests erupted last year over opposition to a proposed extradition law and spread to include demands for greater democracy and criticism of China's efforts to tighten control over the semi-autonomous city. India has surged past Brazil to become the second worst hit country behind the U.S. in coronavirus cases. The nearly 91,000 reported cases added in the past 24 hours pushed India's total to more than 4.2 million. Neha Punya reports from New Delhi.
With a record-breaking surge of more than 90,000 new cases in just one day, India has overtaken Brazil and is now home to the second largest COVID-19 outbreak globally after only the US. The country has more than 4.2 million cases in total. Its death toll is lower than many other countries, but for 5 days, it's reported more than 1,000 deaths daily. Despite the surge in cases, urban train services have resumed operations across 5 major Indian cities, including Delhi. These trains are running at 20% capacity and safe distancing is being enforced, but experts warn this relaxation will lead to another spurt in cases. Neha Punya, New Delhi.
Civil rights groups are welcoming the decision of a San Jose federal judge forcing the Census Bureau for the time being to stop following a plan that would have had it winding down operations in order to finish the 2020 census at the end of September. Federal Judge Lucy Koh's order stops the Census Bureau from winding down operations at least until a court hearing is held on September 17th. Kristen Clark, the president and executive director of the Lawyers Committee for Civil Rights Under Law, said the San Jose ruling, quote, rightfully recognized the Trump administration's attempted short-circuiting of the nation's census as an imminent threat to the completion of a fair and accurate process. In a separate hearing, a 3-judge panel in New York federal court seemed skeptical last week of President Trump's directive to exclude undocumented immigrants from the census. Under questioning by one of the judges, a Trump administration attorney admitted there was no historical precedent to exclude people in the country without authorization from the apportionment process, but said that didn't matter since the president has broad leeway in making decisions on the census. President Trump has directed the Office of Management and Budget to crack down on federal agencies' anti-racism training sessions, calling them divisive anti-American propaganda. More from Lily Volke.
The White House directed federal agencies to stop racial sensitivity trainings, calling them, quote, un-American propaganda, unquote. But experts say these trainings are vital in combating systemic racism in American institutions. Former Republican Governor Christie Whitman of New Jersey says sowing division is a major part of Trump's strategy.
I think he has been very clear in many ways in extorting and encouraging racial tensions and racial outrage. Kellyanne Conway said it. The more of these protests we have, the better it is for us.
A lifelong Republican, Whitman says people can disagree in a civil manner.
I mean, the president is there to protect us. The president is there to honor all people, even the ones who didn't vote for him.
From Pacific Network and Public News Service, I'm Lily Volke.
Weather forecast for the San Francisco Bay Area. Winds kicking up tonight in the east and North Bay Hills. A red flag fire warning. Tomorrow sunny, hazy, highs in the upper 80s to mid 90s. In Los Angeles, low clouds and fog in the morning, then sunny and smoky skies. Highs from around 80 at the beaches to around 90 inland. In Fresno, areas of smoke. Sunny tomorrow. Highs 99 to 100 degrees. If you missed any portion of tonight's newscast, you can listen online at kpfa.org to the archive or to individual reporter stories. Thanks to Rada Keel, who's at the controls. I'm Eileen Alfandary.
Greetings, friends. This is Bob Baldock, wanting you to know that KPFA's author events will soon begin again as Zoom webinars. On September 23rd, we'll present naturalist, artist, writer Obi Kaufman, author of the California Field Atlas, this time with the forests of California. You'll be able to see Obie's enchanting watercolors. Brian Edwards' Secret will host. On September 29th, with City Lights Books, KPP will present poets Juan Felipe Herrera and Naomi Shihab Nad. They'll discuss Every Day We Get More Illegal, Juan Felipe's new book. Check out these Zoom events on the KPFA website. It's a new venture for us, making radio visible.
Welcome, friends, to another edition of Economic Update, a weekly program devoted to the economic dimensions of our lives. Jobs, debts, incomes, our own, our children. I'm your host, Richard Wolff. I want to begin today with a very important event that got much less attention than it ought to have. The Federal Reserve, that is the central bank of the United States, made an announcement over the last week indicating that it plans to keep interest rates in the United States at or close to zero, and to do so for several years, the most frequently mentioned number, 5 years into the future. Now, the only way the Federal Reserve can do that is by pumping vast amounts of money into the economy, which is what it has been doing already. So basically what they were telling us were two things. One, that they will continue to pump more and more money into this economy because things are so desperate that they dare not stop doing that, despite the fact that this mountain of... That they will continue to pump more and more money into this economy because things are so desperate that they dare not stop doing that, despite the fact that this mountain of money is an 2% inflation a year. But since for several years we've had well below 2%, we're now going to have, yes, you guessed it, several years of more than 2%. So we get in a few years to the average of 2%. Okay. Let's then look at what it means to have an inflation of 3, 4, 5%. And I won't even go in to the difficulty of managing inflations. This glib idea, we can go in and manage it to be 3 and 4. Most of human history indicates people who tried to control inflations having a very difficult time doing it and failing as often as they succeeded. But let's look at the effects of the Federal Reserve basically saying, we're going to keep pumping money in, even if it causes an inflation of goods and services. Here's what the point is. By pumping in money, the only one thing we know of is that the stock market will keep going up, because that's the only thing that has happened positively in this economy since the crash that began in February and got worse with the virus. We have had massive unemployment. We continue. We have had massive losses of industry and enterprise. We continue. The stock market has gone up. The rich have gotten richer. And the announcement by the Federal Reserve makes all those rich people smile because they're going to get richer still. Why? Because the money being pumped in goes mostly into the stock market, where it raises the prices of stocks, which those who have significant amounts of them are happy to see. Is that a bubble? Yes. Will it burst? Well, every other one has. I'll leave it to your guess as to what the happy or not so happy ending here will likely be. But here's the most important thing. If they're successful, the Federal Reserve, in making at least some of that money go into the economy, goods and services producing economy, not the stock market, and it drives up the prices, which they seem to want, here's what we're going to have in the next few years. A job situation that is gruesome, with massive unemployment. There are currently, as I speak to you, 28 million Americans getting unemployment compensation. And that's not all the unemployed. We're going to have a gruesome job situation, which is going to put pressure on wages to go down, because every employer knows that they can cut your wages, they can increase your hours, they can do pretty much whatever they want, because if you quit, there are unemployed people who will take your position. So they know that wages aren't going anywhere. Meanwhile, pumping money in will push up prices. You get the message, folks? On top of everything that has been done by this capitalist economy to the working class majority of America, stay at home, wear a mask, lose your job, lower your income, lose your benefits, be unable to have your children educated. All of that, we're now going to have stable wages if they don't go down and rising prices. The savaging of the American working class continues. Only the Federal Reserve has come up with yet another way to make it happen. My next update is a bit of a shout out, a celebration almost, you might say, of the courage of the professional athletes of this country, having stood up in a way that, frankly, I didn't expect. Shame on me. And I want to offset my little bit of shame that I didn't see it by celebrating and congratulating them, standing up for the justice this country so badly needs, and saying, and this is the important thing, we don't find, these athletes tell us, in the political realm, anybody or anything that expresses our commitment, our determination to have social justice. And we don't find it in the labor movement either. So we're going to do it on our own. We are going to do what no political party or politician dares to do, and what no union, even our own union, has so far dared to do, which is the classic act of people who have really one thing to withhold to make their point, and that's their work. That's their labor. In the case of the professional athletes, their extraordinary skills in the sports they have devoted their lives to. They are making a clear message. No business as usual. None of this, we run around so you can be a spectator and have a nice beer while you watch. No, 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 no. These issues have to be dealt with finally. And when working people act like this, take this step, nonviolent, non-confrontational, but crystal clear, what's happening is, and this is so important, something which a great political leader of the past once called dual power. It's when the old systems of power are so collapsed, so weak, so irrelevant, that human beings have to find new and different ways to express their political goals. The parties in this country, Republican and Democrat, don't deal with our real problems. They give us fantasies to watch on TV. And our labor unions have lost their militancy and their commitment to real action. And so people are finding their own. Not only have the athletes done this, making this issue clear to everybody, but they've already spawned copycats. And the first one that I encountered was an email to me, since I'm a professor, by something that has a Twitter presence called #ScholarStrike. #ScholarStrike, all one word. This is a movement of thousands of professors across the United States, teachers at colleges and universities, who have set the date of September 8th and 9th for actions across America's colleges and universities in the same quest for social justice that was pioneered by the professional athletes. Wonderful, long overdue, and across America's colleges and universities in the same quest for social justice that was pioneered by the professional athletes. Wonderful, long overdue, and I'm at least one voice that wants to support and strengthen what these courageous political pioneers business in this country, whose collaboration and coordination, which was always there, is now becoming, what shall I say, intimate? Here's the examples you already know. The President of the United States slapping tariffs left and right, interfering in the pricing of goods and services in international trade, in doing all the kinds of government intervention that Republicans used to say they didn't want. Then we have Mr. Trump again, punishing, persecuting a Chinese-owned company, Huawei, telling us we should not allow them to buy things, sell things, function in the country because, you know, they have a close relationship with the Chinese government. What an interesting idea. The American companies that you've heard of, you know, let's see, Google, Microsoft, Amazon, they all have relationships with the United States government. But nobody around the world has said, oh, we can't do business with them because they talk to the government. This is fakery, friends. This is the government picking winners and losers among companies, becoming an active player. And so here's another milestone. First, President Trump, in his usual bloviating way, announces that he's going to ban the TikTok Corporation from functioning. He didn't know at the time that TikTok has an arrangement with the Chinese government which forbids these companies from selling way, announces that he's going to ban the TikTok Corporation from functioning. He didn't know at the time that TikTok has an arrangement with the Chinese. But he tried, and there's the milestone. Trump got together with Microsoft and Walmart, I kid you not, so that a deal could be made in which Microsoft and Walmart together, you might have thought of them as separate corporations, together would buy, at of course a cheap price, the TikTok Corporation because it was about to lose its business in the United States under threat from the government. What a convenient arrangement between Trump and Microsoft and Walmart. The closer and closer coordination of government and big private capitalism has a name in the history of the Western world. It's called fascism. Not the symbols you see with the jackboots in the street. Those are important, heaven knows. But the quiet arrangement that there is no more separation between the government and big business. It's just one big hustle. My last update that we'll have time for is a very quick but very devastating comparison. Denmark and the United States. How did they react to the coronavirus? Was it the same or was it different? Well, I'll use the following metaphor. Is an elephant the same as a flea or is it different? Here we go. Denmark is a small country. It has 10 active political parties. Just a footnote. On the right-wing end are monarchists. They support the Queen of Denmark. Denmark is a kingdom. On the left, there is the Communist Party. 10 political parties. You know why? Because people in Denmark want freedom of choice, and they have a big choice among parties. We, of course, don't. All 10 of them endorsed a lockdown of the country 2 weeks after the first corona case was identified. That happened on February 27th. 2 weeks later, they shut down. They closed all their schools. By the end of the spring, they opened all their schools. And today, what's the story? Per capita, Denmark has 1/6 the amount of COVID cases the United States does. We have 6 times more people with corona per 1,000 than they do in Denmark. What a failure. And they're a socialist country. So remember the next time someone tries to scare you with a socialist country, remember the comparison. It might help you. We've come to the end of the first part of today's show. Per 1,000 than they do in Denmark. What a failure. And they're a socialist country. On Instagram. Please visit our democracyatwork.info website to learn more about our other shows, about our Union Co-op store, and our 2 books. To subscribe to our YouTube channel, follow us on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. Please visit our democracyatwork.info website to learn more about our other shows, about our Union Co-op store, and our 2 books, and we're about to release a new one soon. Stay with us. We'll be right back with today's guest, Bob Henley. Economic Update. It really is with great pleasure that I welcome back to our microphones and our cameras someone who has been on this program repeatedly and each time with, I think, a greater insight and more success. His name is Bob Henley. He is a print and broadcast labor journalist who reports for the Chief Leader, a newspaper covering public unions since 1897. And recently it broadened its coverage to include the entire labor movement. And that's indeed what I'm going to ask Bob to talk with us about. Bob's writing regularly appears in Salon, Raw Story, Insider New Jersey, and Alternate. You have seen him on Democracy Now!, the PBS NewsHour, and heard him on NPR, as well as appearing repeatedly here on Economic Update. So, Bob, thank you very much for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
All right, I'm going to jump right in. You have been following, as part of your journalistic work, the struggles of public employees and their unions in an increasingly difficult governmental labor situation for decades. But now we see that all government employees, school teachers, firefighters, you name it, under enormous pressure because they're on the front lines with this pandemic and its accompanying economic crash. Tell us a little bit about what that struggle is meaning for public employees, and then I want to ask you questions about how they're reacting.
So let's start first with the federal government. What people don't really understand is that Donald Trump, our current president, is the employer, the big boss, if you will, of 2 million civil servants spread throughout all 50 states and territories. In that position, he's responsible, like any employer would be, for the health and safety of all those workers. They have been represented since 1962, based on an executive order signed by John F. Kennedy, by labor unions and have collective bargaining agreements. There's some 700,000 of them that are unionized. They're represented by the American Federation of Government Employees and several other unions. These are the men and women that are on the front lines of the Veterans Administration, the Aviation Security, TSA, the Bureau of Prisons, any governmental function, indeed even our meat processing facilities. And so when Donald Trump decided not to test and to basically ignore the reports he was getting from these frontline workers as they were getting sick, he in essence really proliferated disease, put these families and these workers and their communities at risk. So that's just on the federal level. On the local level, what you have is EMTs and first responders dying at a record number. We know that at least 1,000 healthcare professionals have perished in the process exposing their families. The tragedy here, Rick, is that they warned this country and the media as early as March that the CDC's efforts to, how shall we say, manage the inventory. It's important for you to understand that on March 11th, the New York Nurses Association issued a press statement that warned that the CDC had changed the guidance that covers how we use N95 masks. And prior to this time, one would have been written up as a nurse or healthcare professional if you didn't get rid of the mask after each clinical encounter. The way the CDC, under the pressure from Mr. Trump, wrote the new regulation, you were to adopt said N95 in your lunch pail and carry with you all week long. The public health professionals, the nurses, doctors warned that this would result in a loss of life among the healthcare sector and, perhaps most provocatively, turn hospitals into a vector of the disease they were fighting. I submit to you, at this sad point, that's exactly what happened.
Wow. In other words, if I could be blunt, the policies of this government are responsible for the deaths of federal employees in sizable numbers.
And essential workers. In fact, it might be said that what's required now, I must say there are some progressive voices, Colin Maloney, Congressman Nadler, and even a bipartisan Congressman King, talking about creating a way of having something like the Victims' Compensation Fund after 9/11 to at least provide some support for what is maybe thousands of essential workers who have perished in this pandemic and in the process infected their families.
How has the U.S. labor movement reacted to all of this? Since it's an assault not only on the working people who are
represent transit workers and people in the airline industry. Early on, there was a situation where they had a customer who was flying out of New York to Miami Beach, The gentleman knew he had a pending COVID test, and he found out while they were taxiing that he came back positive. So he informed the flight crew of this. They immediately removed him appropriately from to spare the crew and the population on the plane, the other passengers. And then management told this flight crew that they were to return back to service and turn around another revenue flight, and told them that they had to take it because there was no problem. The man was asymptomatic when they got him to leave the plane. Of course, these flight attendants, as so often is the case with working people, were better informed than management. And they disabused management that indeed this was still an exposure. And at that point, the union backed them up. Major politicians called JetBlue, and these individuals were able not to get on a revenue flight and got the 2 weeks they needed. That was one example. On the other hand, we've had what happened with the meat processors, where the president used the Defense Production Act to force the meat plants to be open, despite the fact that there was growing concerns by both law enforcement and local public health officials in these primarily rural areas that the plants were just blowing up with COVID. And so rather than side with local law enforcement, first responders, the Blue Lives Matter people, the president decided to go with the companies. And so they didn't have to do anything that was required. And so as a result, close to 200 folks who work in that industry, primarily people of color and immigrants, died, and 4 USDA inspectors died as well. So that's how it's gone. Now, one would have thought that in an America with a more robust and militant labor movement, no meat would have moved in the country at that point. Unfortunately, I'm sad to report that aside from an op-ed from Mr. Trumka, everything else was very lacking, of course, except for the United Food and Commercial Workers, who did all they could, but were sadly in isolation.
Okay, my next question follows. Tell me how you react, as so many Americans are now reacting, to the decision of professional athletes, some of the finest athletes this country has or has produced, making a decision that the political parties of this country do not represent what needs to be done politically or their view of it, and that the labor movement doesn't either, and that they're now going to make sure there's no business as usual. How do you see this in the context of everything you've just said about what public employees are confronting?
I think it's a transformative moment. And I think that it's no accident that this is a primarily younger workforce, primarily, but not exclusively, young men of color.
You just said about what public employees are confronting.
I think it's a transformative moment. And I think that it's no accident that this is a primarily younger workforce, primarily, but not exclusively, young men of color. And I think that the fact that they have such agency and are willing to put at risk that agency to help rekindle the militancy that is required. I mean, the reality here is that while the drumbeat of the corporate media is that we are to stay tuned and participate in the election and get in our ballot, for many and thousands of essential workers, that won't be entirely too late. And those are the lucky ones. There'll be individuals, who will pass as a result of this, who have died, whose families will be infected. Moreover, as we speak right now, 1.5 million public workers have been laid off. And it looks like because of the lack of intervention by the Republican Congress and Mitch McConnell, that there's going to be no backstopping like there was corporations for the very entities, our municipalities and our counties, Rick, that provide us the backstop against the expansion of this awful disease.
Yeah, it does overwhelm you every now and then. Is to get back to the pre-COVID normal. In other words, we just have to get back to where we were, I don't know, let's say January of this year, before everything fell apart. How do you react to that as a stated political goal of the major political institutions of this country?
I think that it is the result of a lack of understanding the trajectory of our current crisis. I think that we did not get into this place of being so vulnerable to a pandemic. And I can only use my own health as an example. I had a health crisis a while back. It was not the consequence of one bad choice on one day. It was a consequence of inattention for decades. And so similarly, we can apply this same basic, simple analysis to the country. And so for a long time, we've seen the United States disinvest in its public health system. All the lessons that were learned after, ironically, the great Spanish influenza outbreak, which brought a revolution in healthcare. It brought about things like school nursing. We had a basic insight. The disease was not in the hospital, but in the community. And over the last 30 or 40 years, as we fought our never-ending war on terrorism, in the last 20, we lost sight of those fundamental lessons from that great loss of life. And so we're relearning it. So I'd submit to you that if we wanted to get back to the pre-normal, we'd just be waiting for the next more deadly virus.
Okay, here's the big one. What they used to call the $64,000 question. Is your reporting and your investigation as an investigative reporter, is it leading you to the conclusion or anything like the following conclusion that the public sector in this society is at such a stage of dysfunction, of neglect, of lack of investment, as you put it, lack of attention, lack even of learning the lessons? Many people think, I'm one of them, that there is a kind of general social collapse underway. What does your work with the public sector, what does it give you to contribute to that conversation?
Well, I think that what I am seeing has been an unprecedented historic response to a once-in-a-century crisis. And what I do see is that I within unions, a kind of grassroots movement that gives me hope. And I would say that one of the problems in terms of what's been happening and the lack of aggressive response and militancy has been the unions themselves, historically, to be honest, have been subject to corruption. You can't fake that. Right? And then also, they've had a problem with succession planning. Men our age and of our circumstance are the people that have been leading these organizations. And there's been resistance historically to providing updrafts for the young people of all different backgrounds and circumstance who are ready and able. And I did see in the Black Lives Matter moment and the response of progressive unions like the CWA and AFSCME and other unions to finally opening the door and letting these young people take the seats that they so have long been entitled to.
Last question that we have time for. I noticed, because I'm a professor, I got word of it over the weekend. I noticed that there's now a movement among professors, thousands of them in this country, to follow the lead of the professional athletes. Their Twitter handle, by the way, is #ScholarsStrike. #ScholarsStrike. And they've designated September 8th and 9th for action by professors who are concerned about social justice and all of the issues that have been raised by the professional athletes. Is it conceivable that we will see other parts of this society, particularly public employees, also following suit and beginning to act to build dual power, a political movement that will do what the political institutions are failing to do?
Yeah, I think so. And I'll tell you that it's kind of coincidental, but poetic, that this leads up to, of course, September 11th, which is the 19th anniversary when we had the attack in New York and Washington and Shanksville, where we learned to do. Yeah, I think so. And I'll tell you that it's kind of coincidental, but poetic, that this leads up to, of course, September 11th, which is the 19th anniversary when we had the attack in New York and Washington and Shanksville, where we lost, close to 3,000 individuals in that attack. What most people don't know is that we have lost more people to date from the occupational hazards that came as a result of to the man and woman. We now find that close to 50,000 of them are sick. This is very analogous to what COVID is doing. And so I do see a kind of flashpoint an opportunity that could be historic.
I wish we had more time, Bob, but we don't. Thank you very much for all of your insights and your work. And we will be talking to you again in the near future. To all my viewers and my listeners, thank you for your attention, and I look forward to being with you again next week.
This is a community announcement for September 2020. Yoga and Qigong instructor Amelia Barilli continues to offer a free 1-hour workshop via Zoom every Saturday. These workshops are designed to de-stress as well as boost and balance the immune system. The Spanish language workshop is at 11 a.m. The English language workshop is at 3 p.m. The Zoom link is posted on her site at ameliabarilli.com. She also has health information on her YouTube channel, The New Paradigms. This community announcement is produced by the First Voice Apprenticeship Program. Please send your event for consideration to calendar@kpfa.org. To hear this announcement again, call 510-848-6767, extension 621, or view it online at kpfa.org.
This evening on Africa Day, we bid farewell.
This announcement again, call 510-848-6767, extension 621, or view it online at kpfa.org.
This evening on